building the X set, I'm drilling and tapping the oil pan for my turbo drain line and cleaning up and prepping the oil bath. A couple things I still need to do. I thought this episode was going to be on installing the oil pan and pump and so forth, but I realize there's still a few things I have to do that I should probably focus on a video on for before I install the oil pan and oil pump and rear main seals. Basically, my baffle here, I need to go ahead and remove the feed line, clean it up. I also need to remove all the gasket material and everything and clean up the oil baffle. Also with the pan here, the oil pan has been completely wire wheeled and painted in the same color as the motor, but I do have my turbo oil drain line here ready for install. I need to put that in before I mount the oil pan on the motor. I have my drill pit and my tap for that, and basically going to be inserting this and drilling it into the pan. And then I have a cap here as the motor is going to be started and operated at the beginning in non-turbo format. So I basically just have this cap here to cap this off, so I don't have any oil leaks until I need the oil drain line installed when I do the turbo install. So time to get to it. What I'm going to do here is I need to remove the siphon for the oil pump from the baffle. Basically, this is what sucks all the oil out of your, I guess you'd call it your sump area in your pan, this lower part here, and this mesh area sits right inside that to basically suction up all your new oil. So you have two bolts here basically for attaching to the oil pump. This end here with this seal, which I will be replacing, will attach directly onto the oil pump. And then basically the oil pump turning will suction oil up through this and supply your oil pressure to your engine. So need to clean this part up. On the baffle here, I just kind of want to get cleaned up as much of this old nasty oil off as I can. It's not in bad shape, as you can see. It's pretty good, but I need to get all this RTV cleaned off and scraped off and get some oven cleaner out there and scrub this thing down like crazy. The first thing I like to do when I'm cleaning off gasket material, especially when it's not a real smooth surface such as this baffle, is take a straight razor blade. You get these at paint section, paint store, anything like that, and basically just take a razor and scrape off all the loose gasket material, because the cleaners generally will not remove this RTV silicone from these areas. Then after that, what I generally do is I take some sometimes some lacquer thinner, but usually I find MEK seems to work best, and wiping it over all that RTV and letting it sit a few minutes, keeping it wet, and then taking a brush to scrub off all the remaining residues from that area. And then usually after that, I find that it's clean enough that I can go ahead and just take it outside, get some carb cleaner on it, brake clean, oven cleaner, whatever you got, or whatever works good for you, and get a final clean on everything to get it as much burnt oil and residues as you can scrubbed off of it. Really, once I get a surface like this cleaned up, I'll take a gray Scotch-Brite real lightly, a very fine one over it. The maroon ones tend to be a little more abrasive, so I should very lightly go over the surface just to clean off any additional residues that I can't get off with chemical. I try to do this while the MEK is still wet on the surface. That way it kind of more scrubs it off rather than sands it off, as I don't want to distort or ruin the mating surface at all. I usually find this works okay, helps smooth out the metal, cleans it up. These Scotch-Brites do, however, leave a lot of fibers behind, so you need to make sure that you don't do this in an engine bay that is assembled or around an engine bay that's assembled, as you don't want those particles getting into there. Okay, so after a real light scrub, that looks pretty darn nice right there, and we'll head this puppy outside and start putting some oven cleaner on it. And once we get that oven cleaner on it, we will get it scrubbed down a little more. Got the oil baffle and the pickup tube back in here from outside. Cleaned up real nice. This baffle's looking great. Got a lot of the oil residues and so forth off it. Just a little more scrubbing on some of these flanges, and I think I'll be good to go. So that is all ready. Now I'm going to turn attention to basically tapping and drilling out the oil pan for the turbo drain. Or drilling and tapping the oil pan. I know in this area can be done since I'm not running power steering or air conditioning. And this would be a little more convenient for the orientation of where the turbo is. But I'm just going to go with the Flyin Miata directions that show the tap being done basically 2 inches from the mating flange and kind of between these two rib marks on the front of the pan. Now some people may be saying, well, how do I know what side of the pan to drill on? It's on the exhaust side, as your turbo is on the exhaust side. And the easy way to tell the exhaust side of the pan is by the oil dipstick tube. So, you know, if you were to put it up to the engine, you know, this is the rear of the engine here. Basically it's on the exhaust side, but the oil dipstick tube is on that side. So do not drill into the side with no oil dipstick tube, as that is a big problem and you'll be buying a new oil pan. So what I'm going to do first is I'm going to basically look at 2 inches from the mating flange down here, and then I'm going to be making a mark right in the center at that 2-inch area and marking this. And this will be my center tap location for starting the drilling of the oil pan. So after you have your mark, you want to take a center punch. I finally purchased a center punch about a month ago, and now of course I cannot find where it went. I know where the package is, but I cannot find where the center punch is. So I'm going to do this the way I usually do, just taking a basic punch and making an indentation into that mark where where the mark is on the pan. Okay, and that will be enough that it'll be able to get my drill bit started. Now I'm going to, I don't have any tapered drill bits. Don't know why, I just never bought one. So I'm going to start out with a small drill bit, and I'm actually going to dip it in a little bit of oil, motor oil, just at a attempt for some cutting oil, so that I don't ruin the bit immediately, and start drilling this hole all the way through. Okay, now that my initial hole is drilled, I'm stepping up to a larger bit and going to be drilling it out with the next step larger. Okay, got my vacuum on here. Okay, now after that's been drilled, I will step up to the next size bit larger, or a few steps up, I should say larger. Once again, dip the bit in a little bit of oil and drill this out. Now I'm going to go ahead and once again clean the shavings up from that. So that last drill bit was a 5/16, so a little over a 1/4 inch, and we need to step up to the size I am drilling, if I can find the bit here, is a 37/64, so we'd be, I believe, a little over a 1/2 inch there. So from there, I'm going to step up to a 3/8 bit. Just drill it with that real quick. I'd probably be okay going in with the larger bit, but I'm just going to step it here to make it a little easier. Okay, and then we will once again vacuum that out. And now I'm going to step up to my 37/64 drill bit size. As you can see, there's still quite a bit of material that we'll have to go through. Dip the bit in oil once again. And now for the final drill bit. So now for tapping for my 3/8 line, I'm going to be using a 3/8 NPT tap. Now, when tapping this, in this case, I'm going to be using a socket to hold that. I do have the proper, I don't know what the tool is called, but the proper, whatever you call it, to hold on to the tap. But I'm just going to go ahead and do it with the socket, as I think it'll be a tad easier. I usually like to, once again, dip the threads in some motor oil or cutting oil if you have it, and get started. Now, you're going to want to ease it into the pan. You don't want to go the whole way through immediately. And just slowly do a cutting motion in until you can get the bit solidly in there. Then I will work it back out. Then I will work it back in. And you want to try to keep this very square to the pan surface. You don't want it going in at an angle if at all possible. Not easy to do, but it is as close as you can. And we'll work it out again in a little bit. Look on the inside of the pan. I can see the tap is starting to come through. Okay, I'll go ahead and remove the tap now. And let's vacuum that out. I'm going to go ahead and clean up the threads on my tap here and then go ahead and insert it one more time. And from the most part, I can see that guys are using this location because the baffle is not in the way here, and it clears a lot of the other areas that can be an issue. All right, we're all good there. But I just stuck with this just in case for some reason if I don't know if I were ever to sell the motor or go another route, or this was going back on a Miata, or I ever have to sell the pan, it is tapped in a location that somebody with a Miata with power steering can reuse the pan. I won't be trying to sell the pan to somebody who has no power steering or has an X set or something like that. So anyways, that is what you want to see. You can see your pipe threads in there. Now you'll need to go through and check, because the first time I tried to insert my fitting, it would only go a couple of turns into the hole. These taps, I don't know if you can see on the camera, but they are slightly tapered. They get a little bit wider and more aggressive the deeper you go in. So you may need to try going back and forth a couple extra turns each time, and then test fitting your fitting to see if it does fit how you want it to. So now I can get mine plugged in there, and it is tight about there. That is good for me. That's what I want. So I'm going to pull that out. And the next step will be to seal it up. You don't want to just rely on inserting this into the oil pan. It actually needs to have something on it like an RTV, a high temp RTV that's oil resistant. Or what a lot of guys are using, I think is the best way to go, is they mix up some JB Weld and wipe around all of the threads with JB Weld before inserting it into the hole. So that's the route I'm going to go on this. Okay, so I have some JB Weld mixed up, and I'm basically just going to slather my threads here with the JB Weld. Okay, there we go, completely covered. Now time to insert into the oil pan. Okay, have that tightened down. As you can see, there's JB Weld pulled up all around the outside there. That should hopefully form a tight enough seal. Normally I would have welded this, but I don't have a TIG welder or a spool gun for my MIG welder to weld to aluminum. But this trick has seemed to work for a lot of people. So that is it for this video. Basically got the oil pan ready to go, got the windage tray ready to go. Next step is going to be putting on the oil pump.